right, welcome back, everybody. This is yet another episode in our Eschatology series, and if you're looking for a little bit more of that cultural content, some commentary on that, I did drop an episode already this week dealing with some of the stuff, kind of where we are, and trying to give some encouragement to people, so you can go check that out if you are so inclined. In this episode, we are going to get into Matthew chapter 24. We are there at long last. If you have not been keeping up, I would say go back and watch the other episodes in this series because they do build on one another. And before we dive in, do me a favor, smash that subscribe button, like, comment on the video. You can comment now and then edit it later if you need to. But we're going to dive right into Matthew chapter 24. So remember, the last time we were here, we were discussing Matthew 21 through 23, which gives us the setting, the general setting. So I'm going to read Matthew 23, 37 through 39, just to sum it all up. I'm going to go 36. So it says, "Truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets, stones those who are sent to it. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing? See, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Now, I spent all that time going through Matthew 21 through 23 in the last episode, so go check that out. Now we get to Matthew 24 and verse 1. It says, "Jesus left the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, 'You see all these things, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down.' As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, 'Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?'" So that's kind of verses 1 through 3. And I want to set the scene and just set us up a little bit here. They just got done hearing all this stuff, all these judgments, all these parables, all these pronouncements against, the mount cast into the sea and the king coming and burning the city and killing the people and all this stuff. Then they come to him and are like, "Hey, we have some questions." So what are they asking about? What would you be asking about? You're there, you see this grand temple, amazing. These are the chosen people of God. This is the chosen temple. This is stuff going way back to Moses, right? So what are you talking about, Jesus? What's going on here? This is what was on their minds. Now, when we get to a couple of the parallel passages in the Gospels, we go to Mark 13, 3 and 4. And just so you know, Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21 are all pretty parallel passages. Especially in Luke, there's a couple, I think it's like Luke 17 and Luke 21. There's a couple of places where Jesus talks about this, but primarily in Mark 13, Luke 21, and Matthew 24. So Mark 13, 3 and 4 says this: "As he sat on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter and James and John and Andrew asked him privately, 'Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign when all these things are about to be accomplished?' Luke 21:7, they asked him, 'Teacher, when will these things be, and what will be the sign when these things are about to take place?'" So what are they talking about? I know in Matthew, people tend to make a lot more ado about, no, they asked him 3 specific questions, or I say people, some people I've heard say this, right? They're asking about the immediate things that he just got done talking about, over a course of a day or two, and all this stuff. But they're also asking him about something he didn't even mention, didn't even say anything about, like the end of the cosmos. That's a stretch. I would have to say, where is the evidence that was anywhere near their mind that they were asking anything about that. I think people get caught up on the King James version that that says, when tell us of the coming and of the end of the world, and we will talk about that in a minute. But I just want to set the scene. He just got done with all this. He says not one stone on another, and then they ask the question. And whether it's 2 questions, 3 questions, one giant compound question, that's not really the issue. The issue is they're asking him about, fill us in on when this stuff's going to happen and how we're going to know based on everything you just said, right? That's what they're getting at. That's what they're getting at. If the point was that Matthew is trying to say, no, there's more to it than this, then it's odd that Luke and Mark completely leave that out, but it's this critical piece of information. I don't think so. So we already read Matthew 24:3, right, where they ask the questions. And they ask about the end of the age. That word age, which most modern translations translate that as age, the King James and maybe 1 or 2 more translate it as world, but the word is aeon. The word is aeon, if you just look it up. This is why so many of the newer translations don't translate it as world, because when you translate it as world, it can be a little bit confusing, because most of us, when we hear the word world, we think like cosmos, like the earth and the planets and the universe. But that's not what aeon means. Aeon, this is, again, Greek, in the Strongs, if you want to look it up, right, G165. This means it's properly an age, by extension, perpetuity, right? By implication, the world, especially the Jewish or Messianic period, right, present and future. It's translated as age, course, eternal, ever, and also it can be translated as world. But when you say world, you understand what it really means, like the age, the world that is today, right? So if I were to say to you, hey, what's up, man? What's going on in your world? I'm not really meaning the cosmos, right? I mean like what's going on, right, in your life type of thing. So another example, just an example in English, how you might use the word world and you don't mean, right, the physical world of reality. So the word I've already mentioned a couple times, cosmos, the word cosmos, it is a Greek word. It's G2889 if you want to look that up in the Strongs, but it's orderly arrangement, right? As in like a decoration, by implication, the world, right? In a wide or a narrow sense, including its inhabitants, right? So that is the word that generally the New Testament uses when it's talking about, like, the universe, the earth, that world. Now, again, I think when people read the Word of God, they need to have a baseline understanding of some of these things. I don't think you need to get caught up on that word world, because the things I'm mentioning, the things I'm talking about, they're obvious even if you don't look up anything in the Greek at all. I know people that are like, they don't want to do any kind of study. They don't want to do any kind of like actually looking at things. It's like, okay, you don't really have to, but you just understand, here's the setting. They asked him some questions about it. That's what they're talking about. They're not talking about something that, lasers and the atomic bomb in the future. Okay? So I want you to notice some of the language that Jesus begins to use when he answers their question. In verse 4, Jesus says, it says, and Jesus answered them, see that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, I'm the Christ, and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. The end is not yet, okay? For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will rise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations. And then the end will come. So notice the use of the word you. He's frequently going into a picture of them. They are asking the question. The question is specific, okay? When are these things going to be? The destruction, all this stuff going on. How are we going to know? What's the sign? What's going to lead up to it? How are we going to know? Well, he then answers their question, and he doesn't say, y'all don't have to worry about it because this is stuff that's way off in the future. Sometime in the future, in a couple thousand years, this stuff's going to happen, so don't you worry about it. He didn't say that. He said, you are going to see these things. You are going to experience these things. These things are going to happen to you. And what are some of the common signs, some of the common things that he talks about here? Well, he mentions wars and rumors of wars. And if you know anything about the history during this time with the Roman Empire, they were constantly at war, constantly defending territory, constantly taking new territory. And so this is not something that's uncommon at all. What's interesting is to note, he does not say the wars are really going to get ramped up. I mean, big time. Yeah, there's wars and rumors of war now, but it's going to be 10x. It's going to be a 10x increase. Doesn't say any of that. Doesn't say there's going to be, you've seen hundreds of thousands of people die in a war, but then there's going to be millions. Doesn't say that either. Doesn't say they're going to get worse or more frequent. He just says there's wars and rumors of wars. Okay. But yet he literally says, but don't be alarmed, for this is going to take place. And then he says, but the end is not yet. He goes out of his way to basically say, listen, people are going to look at wars and rumors of wars and try to pin that down and try and make a big ado about that. You don't be alarmed. The end's not yet. And yet, in today's world, a lot of times, every time there's a war, Russia invading Ukraine. Oh, something going on in Israel. Oh no, China eyeballing Taiwan. This has got to be a sign of, something at the end of something. The beginning of something, the end of something. Read my book, And Jesus said, don't do that. So, I think you and I just need to look at it and evaluate. Jesus said, don't make a big ado about this. Jesus said, don't pay attention to this as some grandiose sign. And then when people say, oh no, do pay attention to this. Well, I think we should note that. Then he goes on. And he says, for nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of birth pains. So again, all these are just beginning of birth pains. Not a big deal. Famines, if you go to Acts chapter 11, says, now in these days, prophets came down from Jerusalem. This is verses 27 and 28, Acts 11, 27 and 28. They came down from Jerusalem to Antioch, and one of them named Agabus stood up and foretold by the Spirit that there would be a great famine over all the world. There's that word world. Uh-oh. Must be some huge cosmic famine coming. Oh, wait. nope, the verse isn't over yet. It says this took place in the days of Claudius. So there's a prophecy about a worldwide famine, and it says, oh yeah, this already took place. So we have famines. Earthquakes, Acts 16, 25 through 26. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken. And immediately all the doors were open and everybody's bonds were unfastened. Now, historically, Josephus records an earthquake that hit Jerusalem in his Wars of the Jews, 4.5.5, if you want to go look that up. Also, we know historically that Laodicea was hit with a very serious earthquake around the time of like 60 AD. So these are things that in just a couple of decades after the apostles heard Jesus say these things, they were common, right? Famines, they happen. Earthquakes, they happen. Notice that, again, Jesus does not say there's going to be famines, but these are going to be famines like no other famine. Or there's going to be so many of them, tons of them, all over the place. Never says that. He never says that. He never says that about earthquakes. And a lot of times people will, an earthquake happens and it's it's just a massive earthquake. Okay. What does that have to do with anything? Nothing. I mean, the way that they measure earthquakes, right, the Richter scale, came to be, right, Charles Richter. Okay, it was the first widely used, method of, I think, really keeping track and measuring these things. 1930s, mid 1930s. So obviously they didn't have this thing back when Jesus was talking to his apostles. But again, he doesn't say there's going to be more and more earthquakes. He doesn't say that. But people will try to read that into look how many we've had just in the last 5 years. Jesus must be, doing something. No, he literally said this is just the beginning of birth pains. It's not any big deal. So we have wars and rumors of wars. We have famines. We have earthquakes. And Jesus basically says these things are going to happen. But these are not the signs to be looking for. These are the beginning of birth pains. And yet, that's exactly what many people will tell you to look at. War over here, Russia, Ukraine, massive earthquake over here with a tsunami to boot, and it must be the time of the end. Nope. That's actually, Jesus told us that's not the signs to look for. He also talks about a falling away, right? Of course, they'll deliver you up to tribulation, put you to death. You'll be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Now, this, again, read the book of Acts, folks. All you have to do is read the book of Acts, and you will see all that stuff happening. I mean, from Acts chapter 6 and 7, where you have the great persecution breaks out on the church, and you have Stephen is stoned, and Saul going around and persecuting the church, and you see persecution all over the place right there in the book of Acts. Look at the history of Christianity in the early days, in the first, say, 100 years. I mean, you see all kinds. But in the first 10, 20, 30 years of the church, there was great persecution. Huge. All the things that Jesus said were going to happen, they happened. They were thrown in prison. Were they thrown in prison? Was Peter thrown in prison? Were Paul and Silas thrown in prison? Right? Was James killed with the sword? Was Stephen martyred? I mean, these are just the ones that are recorded in the book of Acts. So there's persecution all over. Saul is going around, right? Used to be Saul, became Paul, but he was throwing people in prison. He was interrogating people. He was having them put to death. I mean, it was happening. It was happening all over. Right? Then he also says there's a great falling away. Right? Many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. 2 Timothy 4:10, for Demas in love with this present world, has departed me and gone to Thessalonica. Demas, traveling with Paul, abandons the faith, leaves, departs, falls away. 1 Timothy 1:20, among whom are Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I have handed over to Satan, that they may learn not to blaspheme. People who are, again, false teachers, right? People falling away, people departing from the faith. 1 John 2:19, they went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would have continued with us, but they went out that it might become plain that they all are not of us. Again, many people fell away while Paul is still alive. Acts 20:29 and 30. I know that after my departure, fierce wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock, if I could read here. And from among your own selves will arise men speaking twisted things to draw away disciples after them. 2 Peter 2:1 through 3. But false prophets also arose among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the master who bought them, bringing upon themselves swift destruction. And many will follow their sensuality, and because of them, the way of truth will be blasphemed. And in their greed, they'll exploit you with false words. Their condemnation from long ago is not idle, and their destruction is not asleep. Again, read through the book of Acts, read through the epistles, and you see there were false teachers, there were false prophets, there were false apostles, there were false everything. And I actually have a whole series that I wrote about deception. I did on YouTube. I wrote it and did episodes on it. And you can go check that out. I've covered that several times, actually. How that there was a lot of deception and false. I mean, you name the thing, teachers, pastors, apostles, you name it, and there is a counterfeit to it, a false application of that thing. And so we need to understand that this is not what Jesus said to look at as the sign. These are just things he's saying, these things are going to happen. So that for them, as they happen, they're going out there preaching Christ, and then they start getting persecution. They start seeing people fall away. They start seeing, people killed for the faith. That they would remember Jesus said this stuff's going to happen. Okay? And then he says, what? Because of lawlessness, right, it's going to increase. The love of many will grow cold, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations. And then the end will come. Now, first, what end is he talking about? Well, remember, he's talking about there is going to come an end to this temple system. There is going to come an end to the temple. There's going to come an end to these false, Pharisees, Sadducees, these evil, false rulers. There's going to come an end to this very city of Jerusalem. And then they ask him, hey, when's all this stuff going to happen? And he says, don't look at this. Don't look at famines, wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes. That's just the beginning of birth pains. Don't even pay attention. Also, there's going to be persecution. People are going to fall away. There will be false prophets. You will be persecuted and killed. But the end, it's not yet. Then what does he say? Then the gospel will be preached into all nations. And then the end will come. Oh, wow. Okay. The gospel preached into all nations. Well, that hasn't happened yet, right? I mean, that's what we're waiting on. We're waiting for the last few people in, the depths of the Congo to receive the gospel. Not so fast. Remember the word world there. The word world. The word world in that verse is the word oikomene. Now, we've talked about aeon, which can be translated as world and sometimes is. Cosmos, which is translated as world primarily. And then oikomene, which also is translated often as land or world. But let's look at oikomene. We've already seen one example of oikomene, where the prophet Agabus said there's going to be a famine over the whole world. Now, we say a famine over the whole world, and we think right now, in English, in our society, we think the entire earth is covered with a famine. But remember, it said this already took place in the days of Claudius. How's that possible? I mean, people in Australia, the American Indians, the people in Zimbabwe, they didn't experience this worldwide famine. That's because the world they were thinking of was the oikomene, not the cosmos. Oikomene, you can look this up. This is G3625 in the Strongs. And when I say look this up, blueletterbible.org is a great resource. If you don't want to spend any money, it's a free online. You can go on there. You can look up a scripture verse, and you can go and look up the words in that verse and click on the words. And you will see when you click on the word world in this particular verse. This is Matthew chapter 24, verse 14. It will break out the verse, word by word, basically. Some of them might be a little phrase. And you will see that this is G3625, oikomene, which means the land, the terrene part of the globe, especially the Roman Empire, often translated as earth or world. So it does not mean the cosmos, the entire earth. It does not mean that. You could translate and say earth or world, but what do you mean, right? If I say, what in the world are you doing? What on earth were you thinking? I'm using the word earth, but I'm not meaning the terrestrial totality of the earth. We do this in English all the time. I'm just saying this was done in Greek as well. And when we read it in English, we shouldn't translate a word that Jesus was not actually saying. The word he said was oikomene. And when he said oikomene, they knew that means basically like the Roman world. Okay? Let me show you some more examples. Also, Blue Letter Bible will do this for you. When you look up a word, you click on it, you see what it means, where it's used. You can scroll down and it will show you where else that word is used. One of those places is Luke 2:1. Luke 2:1 says this: in those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. Some versions might say taxed. But I can promise you, right, that the Aztecs and the Incas were not registered with Caesar Augustus. Okay? That didn't happen. Right? That did not happen. The Eskimos were not registered. They weren't on the roll. Caesar Augustus didn't get to suck some tax money out of them. Because the word world is referring to the dominion, the domain of Caesar Augustus, the Roman Empire. Even though the English word says world. Right? Now, it's interesting, right? It's interesting that we see the word world or all the nations, and again, where does our mind go? Our mind immediately goes to the entirety of the earth. But now I'm starting to pull back and help us to understand the Bible, the language of the Bible, so we can be better Bible scholars, right? Bible students, better disciples of Christ. Don't you want to understand what Jesus meant, what the apostles meant when they wrote things? How can you be a good disciple and not know what in the world Jesus is talking about? So, let's look at a few verses here, a few scriptures that go along with Matthew 24:14. This gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Well, let's just look. Matthew 10:23 says this: when they persecute you in one town, flee to the next, for truly I say to you, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. Wait a minute, what? You're not going to go through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes? I thought the Son of Man, that's still, I thought we're still waiting for that to happen. So either the apostles are still alive, because this is when they persecute you, right? You're going to go through the towns. either the apostles are still alive, going through all the towns of Israel. They are on a slow walk because, man, they are taking a long time. Or the Son of Man came. He said, you're not even going to finish going through all the towns, and the Son of Man is going to come back. Matthew 16:28. That was Matthew 10:23. This is Matthew 16:28. Truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. What? So not only are there people out there still going through from town to town, but they apparently are immortals. They're vampires, or I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Highlander, where they're immortal guys, and the only way you can kill them is cut their head off or whatever. I guess that's what these are, because if the Son of Man has not come yet, then there are people who were standing there when Jesus said that are still alive today. That's preposterous. That's ridiculous. And I've actually seen people on YouTube and stuff, this is some of the danger of some of these guys, who have said things like the Apostle John is still alive in the earth right now today. That is utterly absurd and ridiculous. Absolute nonsense. What? So, no, you're not going to finish going through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. There are those standing here that won't taste death until the Son of Man comes in his kingdom. Right? Now, what does this have to do with the words I'm talking about? The world, all nations. Look at Acts 2 and 5. Okay? Jesus said, this will be preached as a testimony to all nations, the gospel. Let's look at Acts 2 and 5. Now, there were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men from every nation under heaven. Already there in Acts 2 and 5. Now, either there were Eskimos there and American Indians and Aztecs and people from Australia, Aborigines from Australia, I guess. I don't know. Right? Or the phrase every nation under heaven is similar to the oikomene, the whole world, in that there's a frame of reference that is in mind here. And that frame of reference is not the entirety of the globe. Because I promise you, there was nobody from Canada there in the book of Acts. Okay? They just weren't there. And so they missed the greeting card. And so this is why we need to understand the scriptures when we read it, and not just pull scripture here, and have no idea what it's talking about, because we can get into some really rough waters. Or we can waste our money on a bunch of nonsense books, like when Jesus says, don't worry about wars and rumors of wars or famines or earthquakes, and then we go buy somebody's book that talks all about wars and rumors of wars and famines and earthquakes, and it's like, well, you just wasted your money. Jesus said don't bother. What's going on? We don't know our Bibles. That's what's going on. And that's why I'm here right now, today, teaching you, empowering you, equipping you, helping you. Just throwing it out there. Right? Acts 10, 34, 35. So Peter opened his mouth and said, truly I understand that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, anyone who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him. He is there. He is talking about Cornelius. And he says, now I see that in every nation wasn't there. He's talking about Cornelius and his household. What were there? 100 people there or something? I don't know. But he's talking about what? Even to the Gentile nation, right? The Gentiles as a people. He wasn't thinking about the whole earth, every nation, every tribe that could possibly be named in the earth. It's not what was in his mind. Colossians 1:23. If indeed you continue in the faith, stable and steadfast, not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you have heard, which has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, became a minister. Paul said to the Colossians, this gospel has already been proclaimed in all creation under heaven. Now, strong language, not even like oikomene, He literally says all creation under heaven. Are the Eskimos under heaven? Is South America under heaven? Is Mexico under heaven? Is Australia under? Yes. So I guess they had already reached all those people. Or what's in view is not 2,000 years in the future. Every country, every nation, every individual island of people that we could possibly discover is not in view. What is in view is the oikomene. All the nations, as in all the people groups, right? Which we already see in the book of Acts. There's really only 3 divisions of people. There's Jews, there's partial Jews, there's non-Jews in the Word of God, right? At the time of Jesus, right? Jews, not partial Jews, right? Small group, and then non-Jews. That's like everybody else, all the rest of the nations. So that's why it's saying all the nations, all creation under heaven, the gospel's already been preached. What it's talking about is the totality of the preaching of the gospel, that it has reached the Gentiles, the Jews, the Samaritans. It has gone to all of the earth. And that's why, as we continue to read, we will see that it appears that the things that Jesus prophesied about in Matthew 24, for them, it was stuff in the future, right? Because I just read Colossians, I just read Acts. Well, at the time that Jesus is saying this in Matthew, that hadn't happened yet. Here they are. Here's the book of Acts. Here's us, right? So for them, it's the future, but for us, it's the past. And that is where people get tripped up. That's where people get tripped up, because they forget that the Bible wasn't written yesterday in heaven, sent to your mailbox, and now you open it and every word is written directly to you. That's not the case, right? Jesus was talking to them. For them, it's the future. For us, it's the past. Simple as that. And we have proven that and shown that with the study today. Looking at words like world, aeon, cosmos, oikomene. Looking at phrases like all nations under heaven, or all the nations, and realizing that this already happened. The book of Acts says all nations. Colossians says every creature under heaven. So we need to understand the Bible means a certain thing when it says that. And we need to understand what the Bible means in order for us to understand what the Bible is saying. That's my point. And so we'll stop there with verse 14. We've gone Matthew 24, verses 1 through 14. If you have, additional questions, comments, things like that, feel free. If you're local, right, you can text me. Pretty much everybody, almost everybody in the local congregation either can text me or can get a hold of somebody that can get a hold of me. If you have questions, we can deal with some of those in some of our Wednesday night Bible studies. If you are online, you want to post a question on the YouTube video, you can. But the best place to reach us is on Facebook through Facebook Messenger. Those questions that's a lot easier to kind of see a question and be able to reach out and deal with that than a comment on YouTube. But we will try to pay attention to all these things. So again, like, subscribe, comment, and hopefully this has given some illumination to the scriptures. Go back and read through Matthew 21 through 23, the first 14 verses here. Go back and watch this again, slower. Go look at some of the words I've talked about, some of the scriptures that I'm bringing out, and study this for yourself. And I think you will see the scriptures are much plainer than many people try to make out. Now, this might mean you got to throw some of the books away that you've got on your shelf. But you know what? If what I've explained here today bids you throw a book away, then that probably means that book is trash anyway. So just remember to stick to the Word of God, the scriptures. Let them explain themselves, and you'll be in a much better place. Love y'all. God bless you, and we'll catch you on the next podcast.